came on, he ended up falling off. All right, here we go. Now it's being live streamed. Welcome everyone to the November 16th Human Relations Board meeting for the City of Battle Creek. I'm Kathy Zenda Wilson. I'm honored to chair this board. We are going to get started with roll call. Alicia, take it from here.
Okay, Mr. Lucier. Lucier.
Oh, he's, hang on a second.
Hang on. Hey, Alicia, you've got a bunch of background noise too. Can you move to another room?
It'll take me a few minutes. I have to get a new computer.
It's just really, or ask somebody to stop. Yeah, I'm sorry, but that's really hard to hear.
Give me just 1 second.
Well, we've all learned to adapt during this very interesting time of technology, and business has to continue, and we're still open. And I know Alicia's in the clerk's office. And
Okay, I'm ready to take roll. Everybody's going to be really quiet for a few minutes. I'm going to first take roll of the people I know are here, and then I'll just list out those who aren't for the record.
Sounds good.
thank you.
Yes.
Chris Lucier, present remotely from Battle Creek.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Zenda Wilson.
Present remotely from Battle Creek.
Thank you. Ms. Kipp.
Present, attending remotely from Battle Creek.
Thank you. Mr. Woodward.
Present and attending virtually from Battle Creek.
Thank you. Ms. Ackley.
Yana Ackley, present, joining remotely from Battle Creek.
Ms. Wardell.
Whitney Wardell, present, reporting remotely from Battle Creek.
Thank you. Currently showing absent are Commissioner Bonica Herring, Derek Freeman, Amora Austin, Jeffrey Cotton, Jennifer Greger, Deanna Spencer, and then I see Pastor Hooper is just joining us, so we'll give him a minute to get on and I can go ahead and take him, and then we will have quorum.
Oh, good.
Pastor Hooper, are you joining us remotely from the city of Battle Creek?
Yes, I am.
Perfect. Thank you. We do have quorum now.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Alicia.
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. Last time we met, it was sunny and warm, and it isn't anymore. And Pastor's wardrobe right now tells us exactly how cold it is outside, in case we were wondering. I've missed all of you in the 2 months since we've been able to meet, but I would like to ask for a motion on the minutes from September 21st.
I, Kiana Ackley, motion to approve the minutes from September 21st of 2022.
Chris Lucier will second.
All right, we have a motion and support for the approval of the minutes of September 21st. All in favor say aye or thumbs up.
Aye.
All right. Opposed, same. Okay, the minutes have passed. Alicia, do we have any communications?
We have none.
Okay, committee reports?
None.
Okay, perfect. We're going to go into our old business. There's a few things here we want to cover. I know we have language access services on the agenda. I think we're going to keep that ongoing, but please know that Rebecca and I continue to work through logistics of that and plan to have a more robust update on where we are with that in January when we meet next. As for the community survey for the Citizens Review Board, many of you might by now have either seen the press release, looked at the survey, or seen this morning's WWMT piece that they interviewed Carrie Whitfield, myself, and Chief Blocker. I wanted to provide, first of all, give a shout out to the city staff for taking all of the input that we had around the survey and getting it not only out there, but out there in 3 languages. So we have it out there right now in Spanish, in Burmese, and in English. I'm going to provide us an update on our responses, not the content necessarily, but at least you'll get an update because it is open till December 4th. So we've got a couple more weeks where we're going to be gathering data. And the goal is when we come together in January, we will have the data compiled in a way that we can do some sense making. We'll look at it and see what it helps us understand and what our next best steps are. I'm going to pause for a minute and let Alicia take the rest of the role because we've been joined by a couple more folks.
Okay.
Okay, let's see who has joined us here.
Yeah,
Um,
Dina is here.
Ms. Spencer?
Yes, Dina Spencer, virtually from Battle Creek.
Thank you. Miss Austin?
Hi, Mira Austin, virtually from Grand Rapids.
Thank you.
All right, thank
Did
you.
I miss anybody?
Nope, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so Jessica was lovely enough to offer me an update as of yesterday afternoon where things stood with the survey. We have 2 Spanish responses and 106 English responses. She did share the Spanish and Burmese links with Jose and Ta, so with Voces as well as with the Burma Center, so that they could share it with their networks. Flyers were created also that they could post in their physical spaces, and the flyers in the 3 languages are posted in the City Hall entryway. So anybody who's entering the City Hall will see it there. We had 75% of respondents have had some kind of interaction with the police department, 73% having positive interactions, and 73% rating of the police department professional. So these are just some high level updates on what we're learning so far. 52% of respondents so far say that they believe a CRB is necessary, Citizens Review Board. 28% were as no, and then 20% were unsure. 50% of those respondents think it should include both current and former law enforcement. And the top 3 goals, because remember we had a list of goals in there that we thought we wanted people to prioritize based on what the elements were. The top 3 so far were to improve the public's understanding of police policy, training, and practices, to increase public confidence and trust in the police, and to build bridges and connections between law enforcement and the community. And 56% of the respondents have lived in Battle Creek for over 20 years. I think that's helpful. 69% of the respondents are between the ages of 45 and 74. So we're getting responses from an older population so far. We may want to pay attention to how we might want to get some more youth voice in this, if possible. 95% identified as not Latinx, 81% are white, 56% are men, and 89% are heterosexual. I think at this point in time, since we have a couple weeks left, knowing those demographics is important, because if we as a board can get out there and really encourage folks to complete this survey, we will hopefully see those demographics around respondents shift so that we feel like we have a more representative suite of data to make decisions from. I want to open it up for any discussion, thoughts, or reflections on what I've shared so far.
Thanks for sharing.
Thanks, Chris. Has anyone heard anything out in the community that they want to share right now about the survey itself or about the Citizens Review Board? No? How many of us have completed the survey? Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Rebecca. All right, I'm going full transparency. I've not done it yet, and this is a good reminder for me to get on and actually complete it. And I'll do that today yet. So let's get those numbers up. Utilize your networks to the degree that you can. If you work in an organization that you want to, allow people to know that this is out there because the city wants to hear from you, that's a great place to start. If you worship, encourage folks in your church to do so. And if you have family members, it's also great to hear from them. So I'm going to encourage both of my adult children to complete it as well, because I think it would be helpful. And they'll share it with their friends. So the plan is that we typically do not have a December meeting. I'm going to propose that we continue that for this year. So if you would have seen the 2022 calendar that we set and approved last year, that would have meant that December had no meeting. So that puts us at January 18th. And I know that's farther down on the agenda, but I just want to say that by then we should have plenty of time to bring back to you some of this data in a way that is disaggregated so that we can really kind of step forward. I do think that at that point, we're going to want to re-engage Carrie Whitfield and the team that put together the initial proposal to put together a plan. I don't know that all that will happen in January because we have some other things we want to accomplish, but and not all of it has to happen in this meeting. There are things we can do outside of here as well. So I did run into Carrie at a couple different events over the course of the last 6 weeks. And he feels really good about the fact that we were doing this survey. It was very well received by him, which I think is great. And so if we can really, take these next steps in partnership with he and the group that he pulled together, I think that that benefits all of us. We'll lean on Rebecca a little bit for some guidance when we get prepared to present to the commission. I will no longer be a commissioner. Last night was my last meeting. I will remain as board chair for Human Relations Board, but it does mean that the composition of the commission is slightly different, and I won't know that, and I won't really have as much insight as I do right now. So any other questions or comments? Yes, Chris.
Will we be getting a city commissioner on the board moving forward? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Correct.
Yep, and I was asked by the mayor last night to make a recommendation. I'm not sure exactly how that works. If anybody has any recommendations or thoughts, I'm open to that. You can email me and let me know. I think that ultimately it's the mayor and vice mayor's decision, as well as yours, right, Rebecca? There's a small review committee that meets. So I imagine that our recommendation would carry some weight, but ultimately it's their decision. So. And we can probably share with the group, Rebecca, a roster of the new commissioners, right? So folks know who they are.
Yes. Do you want me to go ahead?
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. So Ward 1 is Roger Ballard. Ward 2 is Janasia Morris. Ward 3 is Patrick O'Donnell. Ward 4 is Chris Simmons. And Ward 5 is Jim Lance. Mayor is Mark Benke. At large will be Carla Reynolds, Sherry Sophia, and Jake Smith. I think that's 9.
Yep,
In my head, I think that's 9. Okay.
Yes. So if you have personal relationships with any of those, if you have any recommendations based on your experience with any of those folks, I'm open to that. We don't need to have that in an open forum here in this meeting, but know that we can connect offline and discuss that in the coming months, because I anticipate we'd want one of them on board by January, correct, Rebecca? Because I'm still currently a commissioner, so this meeting is covered by commission until the new commissioners are sworn in on December 6th. And then we'll want to continue. I believe Bunika Herring has expressed interest in continuing, but that does require that she go through the same process a new board member would have to go through with an application process and approval. So we'll support her in walking through that. And do I have to do the same, Rebecca?
I'll check with the city attorney. I do not think so, because you're the chair, but I'll make sure that I double check with the attorney.
Okay. All right. Thank you. It just occurred to me that I'm in the same position Bunika is, and I don't want to miss a step. Okay. We had a work group. I'm going to move to code compliance on the agenda now. We had a work group that met at the end of October. I believe that's when it was, Chris, you can remind me. Yeah, 10/26. To talk about what we can do as a board to support and engage our code compliance department. This was something that came up during our discussions around community points of interest over the course of a few months. And so Chris Lucier went back to the department and talked with Jason Francisco about what he might do by coming in and helping us understand their process so that we're more aware of what goes on there. But we really want, when we invite them in to talk to us, we'd like to be really thoughtful about how we're spending that time and how we're organizing ourselves to have that conversation. And I'm going to ask for Chris to unmute himself and help me with this, because just to make sure that we're really clear, because I believe it was just the two of us. Oh, Kiona, you were there as well.
No, Kiona was there as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so there were the three of us that were part of that conversation.
And it would be good to hear from Kiona too.
It will, yeah. So if the three of us could actually just kind of bounce back and forth, fill in the gaps that I'm missing, etc. Because ideally what we want here is to have us positioned well to know how we want to have that conversation and what can Chris bring back to Jason to prepare for what we're going to do in January. And so what we talked about is, let me see here. You bringing some data in, Chris, and forgive me if I've got this wrong, around your community development survey that really will help us understand how that informed some changes in practice.
Yeah, so we do have disaggregated data by a bunch of different characteristics, but including, race and ethnicity around the kinds of, we asked an open-ended question that was, if you could change one thing about your neighborhood, what would it be? And I think off the top of my head, I think something close to like 9% of all respondents had like specifically mentioned code compliance. And then a number of other folks mentioned things that are code compliance related, like concerns about vacant buildings in their neighborhood or the condition of rental properties or other things like that. And the thing is like we can pull out, disaggregate the data by specific neighborhoods or by race and take a look at what were the exact kinds of comments folks were making when they were confronted with that open-ended question, to get an idea, not just, were they concerned about code compliance generally, but like what exactly, what was coming out of the, what did they write down in response to that question, which is kind of nice. We asked folks to rank 38 different community development needs. Code compliance was one of them, and other things related to the condition of neighborhoods, vacant buildings, things like that are in there as well. And so we have all of that data disaggregated by race. You could see who cared most about certain types of issues. That's a little bit of data. We have other kinds of data as well, just like hard data about where vacant buildings are, where code enforcements happen, who's affected, like, what percentage of code enforcement are homeowners versus renters. We don't have specific race data or data disaggregated by race as far as like where code enforcement's happened, or a lot of that hard data about the current status of properties in communities or in the neighborhood, because that just isn't collected anywhere. But we do know, the demographic makeup of the neighborhoods down to the block group level about where that happens. So we can take a look at neighborhoods that have higher percentages of African-American or Hispanic, Latino, or Burmese folks living in them. So we have access to that kind of data and could do some review of that as a group.
Yeah, and I think in support of what, right? I think that our goal here today was really to create almost a work session for us to identify what questions would we want to ask of code if they were here, so that when we're working with Jason and his team, we can help them be prepared for the conversation that we want to have. And so I know that one of the requests that Kiona had was around making sure that the data is available to us geographically. Like, can we look at how are we reconciling what we might be hearing out in the community with what the data is telling us? Because they don't always align, right? So is there a way for us to actually look at this and say, how do we make sense of the things we're hearing? Now, often we will hear from some outliers. That's true in some cases, right? The people who are loudest are the ones that we tend to hear, and they may be something that isn't part of a pattern of behavior or reactions or experiences, but nevertheless, we're hearing them and they need to be considered. And so I'm just going to ask people, you don't need permission to be called on, but let's have a conversation about what kind of questions we want based on what you've heard, experienced, or learned in the community related to code enforcement that we'd want to ask the team when they come in January. Yeah, I thought I heard somebody say something. Nope. So I'm curious, I'm going to start it.
Okay.
I'm curious what practices they have incorporated in to help address any potential bias. Like, what is there in their current practice that accounts for that. So that it's not, you know, it's not just a random, I don't like this neighbor, so I'm gonna go out and actually give him a, because that sometimes that's the way it feels, right? That's what people will think. Why did my neighbor get something or I didn't, or vice versa? So I'd like to know just what are they doing from a practice perspective or in their policies to make sure that that is accounted for. Ooh, sorry about that. Didn't know that was on. And is it possible to capture these questions somehow, Rebecca? Not that the floodgates have opened, but they might.
Yep, I see Becca's on here, so she will track too. Plus, we have this recorded so that we can always go back if we needed to, if we missed something.
Thank you.
So it's a part of a lot of the, so I've done a lot of research on folks who are either analyzing code enforcement organizations or policies across the country for equity practice and other sort of just basic like enforcement policy, how to put together equitable enforcement policy. So in part of that research, I uncovered a bunch of questions that are specifically focused on equity aspects of policy development. And so I've been sort of putting together a guide, both partially I'm happy to share with the group and shared with the subcommittee, at least those general questions at our subcommittee meeting. And I'm also going to share internally with code enforcement as a way of helping them think through what are the things that they've done that do address equity and maybe kind of like do their own internal equity audit in advance of maybe meeting with us so that they can be thinking through how do they modify what are the typical presentations that they give in the community about what they do so that it is focused on those issues related to equity. So some of the questions that were sort of front and center for me were, you know, does the code enforcement division or the policies that it's implementing, are they focused on achieving equitable outcomes? Are they, do those policies exist because of a larger failure in the system or that needs to be addressed in some other way? And have they given some consideration to those things? Have they thought, you know, with an equity lens about what are some of the maybe unintended impacts of their policies or practices on groups within our community? And to what extent have they thought through those issues? And what kinds of steps have they put in place to ensure that there aren't disparate impacts for certain groups? I know from some of the discussion in our community that some groups can be stigmatized, right? Sometimes if you have conversations in our community around code compliance, renters can be stigmatized, right? Or just honestly, just landlords too, sometimes, just in terms of how we treat them. We don't, rental properties aren't inherently bad or anything, but sometimes if you look at the conversation, that can sometimes happen. And to what extent has that been allowed to shape some of our practice or implementation of code enforcement or the policies that we've created? To what extent are they looking at data and using data to shape how they enforce code enforcement? To what extent are they proactive in their approach? Because proactive approaches leave you less susceptible to bias. If you're just going with a complaint-based system, then not only do you have to worry about the bias of your code officers, but now you've just introduced the biases of your entire population, right? Because folks with biases can now get on the horn and just start punishing their neighbors based on, whatever they think is right. Yeah. So those were some of them. I will go through them. I actually have a list of like a whole slew of them I'm going to sort of push towards code compliance so that they think through, but I just share some of what was on my mind.
Thank you, Chris. That's what really stood out to me when we had the work group meeting was really we need a better understanding of this idea of a proactive approach, because what I learned in that conversation was that that's how our code compliance is oriented. So us knowing more about that provides us a better opportunity to be advocates and supporters of them and to understand and answer questions out in the community when we hear them. To say that it's perfect and doesn't have any room to improve, I don't think anybody would ever suggest that, but I do think it's important for us to at least have that kind of understanding around their intent. Other questions?
In our
Consideration?
discussion, Kiona, you brought up, at one point when we were going back and forth on the subcommittee, we both found a place of agreement around getting to understand the why behind how they do certain things or why they do certain things. And that if we just end up with the what, if our conversation is just what they do, it
Yeah.
really won't have gotten deep enough, that we really want to understand the why behind what they're doing. So I just want to lift that up.
Thank you, Chris. In addition to the geography piece too, that I know was added to the list, I would also be interested in learning how often are they in the fields, and is one specific neighborhood, I guess, worked more than another? Like how often, if we can look at the numbers and see how they compare, even if it's like from the Washington Heights area compared to the Lakeview area, compared to the East Side area, just if we can break it down, I would greatly appreciate that as well.
I think, Kiona, to add that to the intent around why, it would be good not to just know what they're doing, but help us understand why, right? Is there a particular reason because the housing stock is the way it is? Is it, help us understand why decisions are made around where they go?
And are we also able to look at how many of these locations, whether residential, commercial, falls within the land bank as well? And how are they being held accountable, those that are in that land bank portfolio, to have the upkeep of those spaces? Because oftentimes when I do find myself saying, wow, that house or that building is in such poor condition, then find out it's land bank, but who's holding them accountable as well?
Thanks, Kiona. That's helpful. All right, we have a little bit of time between now and that meeting, but I don't want to, I'd like to give them as much advance notice of the questions that we'll have as possible. So if you walk away from this meeting and an idea occurs to you about a question that you'd like us to add to this list, you could send it to me by email. You can send it to Rebecca or to Chris. We'll make sure that we get it on the list and that we provide it there. And I want to give a debt of gratitude to Chris for working with them to get prepared for this. And I'm happy to help in any way that's going to be productive, Chris. Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I had a couple of issues that I had heard from some of the residents. One concerning the vehicles, abandoned vehicles, or maybe parking abandoned, and then parking on situations like parking in the yard, things like that. And then also the vacant building, the monitoring fee. It's some complaints about that, or some questions concerning that as well.
So, Pastor, about abandoned vehicles, just like how it's decided who gets.
Well, I guess some of the complaints they've already reported it, and they've been, but the people still continue to park in that area and things like that. So I don't know any specific one, but that was a concern that was brought up several times. Yeah. Okay, so I'm assuming that they're more like abandoned buildings, vehicles, and then they may clean the area up, and then they're right back again there, then they appear back on the grass and things like that, or non-parking areas. Yeah. So, and I guess it would be just good to hear what kind of policies that they use and how they determine what the parking situation is, or how they approach it as an officer. Code compliance. Yeah.
Thank you, Pastor. I'm also curious about now that neighborhood planning councils are back in effect, and not in all neighborhoods, but in many. How do they communicate with them? Because I know that's a place where a lot of people go with these kind of complaints. So if I've got a neighbor who's parking all over their yard, I may show up at a neighborhood planning council to let people know that that's what's going on. So can we understand the process for gathering data and getting there? Dina?
Maybe just kind of understanding the full scope of what code compliance is. Is it abandoned buildings and cars and yards and peeling paint and junk all over the porch? Or is it noise ordinances and dogs barking all the night? Like, maybe just a full scope of what that is, so that we can understand it a little bit further as well, and what falls under what. To me, a noise violation, I don't really know where that would fall. I don't know if I have neighbors screaming in their front yard at 2 a.m. Is that a code compliance issue? Is that a police issue? Is it just simply a sorry about your luck and you can't sleep issue? I don't really know. So just understanding some of those types of things as well, I think would be helpful, and just those definitions and what falls under what.
That's helpful. I mean, ultimately what we want is an informed populace, right? We want folks to understand, who does what within the city. Can we play a role in helping people understand that? I think that's a part of it. I think, starting whatever discussion we have with the why is really powerful. Like, what is their ultimate goal? Why do they do what they do? Why does code exist in the first place? And then really kind of getting into some of the mechanics of it so that we can be better advocates and bring issues that we may hear about to the forefront when necessary, or some of them we might be able to deal with ourselves out in the community if we're out there. All right, that's helpful. Thank you. As far as new business, you received in your email the 2023 roster of meetings. So our next meeting is January 18th, but you'll see that the cadence is the same as it's always been. So I believe this is the third Wednesday of the month, maybe second?
Third is correct.
Third, thank you.
Yep.
And so you'll see those on there. I know that we have within our ability, if there is a month that we need to take off in the summer, because often that will happen, but we do have all of the summer months on here currently. I know that we did choose, I think, to take one summer month off last year. So we'll have that within our purview if we need to, as well as us being able to create work groups where necessary, like we did around the code compliance issue. So just know that not all the work has to happen in this space because it is limited. We would like to suggest potentially an in-person meeting in January if we think we could do it. I just see Dina clapping, so that would be wonderful. I know that is a potential burden for others. So we've asked if city staff could poll folks. I'm not going to put you on the spot here, and see if we can do that. And for those who may not be able to get there, is there a way for us to do a hybrid where we could have them on screen and they could zoom in? So I'm seeing a yes. So let's tentatively plan it at being an in-person meeting. I think that this sort of conversation is more conducive to in-person space, and I'd love to share space with all of you. I mean, we've been virtual for the last 2 years, and so it would be great to get into some shared space together. And just know that you'll have an option if that's not doable for you to be there virtually. All right, now I'm going to open it up for any points of interest or open discussion on things that you're hearing out in the community that you want to bring to our attention.
I like to raise the continued ask of getting an update on the Xavier West case.
Thank you, Kiona. Rebecca, can you share with us what the city's been doing to at least try and learn?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Chief Blocker has been trying to get a hold of his contact at the AG's office today. They said they'd call back and didn't get a call back. And I texted him at noon. He hadn't heard. I texted him right before this meeting and he hasn't heard. So I apologize, but I know that the chief and his team are continuing to try to get an update or response from the AG. And we know the election certainly did put a pause on some things coming through that office, and we'll just continue to try.
I mean, the upside here is that we've got a continuation of Attorney General Nessel's position. So the fact that they took it on initially, or at least it's on her desk, that's what she told Dina and I when we saw her. I think there was a question that we asked when we saw her at the Pride Parade earlier this year. I've been asking around to see who I know that might have a contact at the AG's office, and I've been unsuccessful. So if anybody on this group knows of anybody that's up there, please feel free. I'm happy to make the phone call. I just don't even know exactly who or what. I did consider, I've been working a lot with Michelle Richard, who is on the governor's cabinet. She works in the early childhood space. It's a bit of a stretch to think she can get us there, but I'm willing to try anything right now. I don't think what we're asking for is much. We would like an update on where things stand. Is this going to move forward? I mean, I imagine I've not heard from the family. I don't know if anybody here has, but I know that it feels very unresolved for many of us in the community.
I can look to see what kind of contacts I have. I feel like what I have is more like PR type contacts. However, that may not be 100% accurate. So let me do some digging as well, and I can send to you whatever it is I've got.
Thank
And
you.
even if it is a PR person, they know somebody who knows somebody usually. So we can maybe work through channels that way, and I'll be glad to send that along. I'll dig around and see what I can find.
Thank you, Dina.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a chance to meet briefly with Chief yesterday when I was at City Hall for the WWMT interview. And, you know, he shared that he would hope that this board could help really reinforce within the community the fact that our police department did forward this to the AG's office. It's not that they're not doing anything. Right now, it's out of their hands and in the hands of the AG. And I know that there is, you know, it's frustrating for folks to not hear anything, and that frustration is gonna get directed at who's local, right? That's just the way it happens. But the more we can help people understand that we're trying our best to try and get some information, and that I don't want to say no news is good news, but at least we haven't heard that it's completely shut and that they're doing nothing, right? Let's hope that now that the election is over, maybe there's some room on their docket to get to this, and with some pressure from us to try and encourage that. At least an update. I would hope that we could get somewhere. So other things that people are hearing, any other issues that you want to bring up?
I'd like to mention, well, probably to Rebecca, but when we had the pause on the equity and inclusion officer, I wonder how that's, what's the plans for that? I think it's pretty important for the city get established. Thank you.
Yes, Rebecca, please.
Thank you. I just want to make sure it was okay. Thank you, Pastor Hooper. I appreciate that. And we learned a lot during that particular process. A lot from the community, a lot from the participants, and a lot as an organization. I am taking all of that information into consideration, and I hope that I'll have some good news to share either later this week or next week in regards to a successful candidate.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'm curious, Rebecca, just to put this into the universe, like how we might engage with whoever the officer ends up being. Like, what's the best way for us to do that as well, if you've got thoughts?
I have lots of thoughts. Sometimes they coalesce and sometimes they don't, to be honest with you, but because it's new for us. But I would hope that position as a regular attendee of this board to share, kind of what the focus areas are, what they see in the future. We know at first we'd love for them to have an internal priority, but we also know then that will move into the external priority and building those relationships. And we're envisioning an internal discussion with employees that's facilitated by that new position, as well as another community conversation about the position. Certainly, we heard about the importance of them. Well, a lot of feedback on living in Battle Creek. Please know that that's not something that the city has the right to ask. That was struck down by the state of Michigan, 20 some years ago. But it was good to hear that it's important for this person to be well familiar with the Battle Creek community, whether they physically live here or not. And so that has been really important. And please know if the candidate does say yes, I think they're very well familiar with Battle Creek. So I don't think that that's going to be an issue. But we also are trying to work through and again, I know I already said this, but kind of what are we focusing in internally to our organization? A lot of the things from the equity audit pointed to specific things that we needed to do or continue or add as an organization, a local government organization, and then also how our systems interact with our community, what barriers, gaps, et cetera, should we be looking at through a different lens. So, even when I read over the list of things that we would like to use our officer for, I'm overwhelmed, and I don't want a new person come in and be completely overwhelmed. So we also want to be realistic, but please know that I also got feedback about the position and who's responsible for oversight of the position. So please know this is a City of Battle Creek employee. They will be part of the city manager's office, reporting directly to the city manager. So I know there was some confusion, and I apologize if that was not communicated clearly. But just some things that, like I said, we learned through the process. But again, I would see them regularly interact with this board. And I was thinking while you were having the discussion about code compliance, how helpful it would be to have that person liaison with Chris, with code, with this board, and others, just to inform and learn, so that we could be thinking about some of these things differently. And so as you were talking, I'm thinking, ooh, I hope that they do. You make these mental notes. So I would believe that person would be a very regular face and would probably become the staff liaison to the Human Relations Board. So again, we're in a learn as you go process, but I hope, Pastor Hooper, if not this week, next week, I will have some good news to share.
Okay.
I'll just be honest about that position. Like when I attended that session and I heard all the expectations that folks in the community had for what that position would do, that were outward facing in the community, I'll just be honest, it freaked me out, because I was just like, what? Like, no, they need to be working internally in our organization. Like, we've got a 15-person job to do on the inside of the organization. So, and honestly, like this whole code thing, it's on the back of our minds every single day that we could be really using a person like that as a resource to help us. I mean, just in all aspects of community services work. So making it more accessible, language access, just more meaningful outreach to the communities, helping to facilitate the development of those, helping to put in policies that give staff the ability and direction to be able to do that kind of work, because it's extremely hard to try and tackle all those issues on your own. And like, honestly, it's more than a full-time. And I know we have to be, we have to realize we're going to get some support in some direction, probably, because that person's time is going to be so demanded. But yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Let me just say thank you, Chris, because I was also a little freaked out after that session. I'm
Yeah.
thinking, wow, this is, the expectations are great. And as you said, Chris, we have been working internally about, the many needs of our organization internally, and know that we always knew that we would have to reassess whether it is really attainable from one person. Because again, we don't want to bring somebody on and not set them up for success. So we've been pretty open about this will be a position that you create as your own along with the city teams, and then we'll see what our future needs are. So thank you for saying that, Kathy. I'm sorry to interrupt there.
No, it's okay. I've had a couple thoughts now that just really stuck with me. One is that I don't think people consider the reality that the city is itself as an organization. Like we have the city, right? The city of Battle Creek, and then you have the city as an organization that you have to run. And I think they get so muddled together that when we have things like those open forums where people are talking about what does the city of Battle Creek need in a DEI officer, it can get a little, I don't know, just a little muted and muddled. And so I think that being really, really clear that this is an officer for the organization of the city initially, right, I think is going to be important, and all of us need to do that as well. I also think that, as I start reflecting even deeper on the Citizens Review Board and what that process is about, and while that is focused on the police department, how does the Human Relations Board position itself to be similarly oriented to support the other departments in the city? Like, how do we, and could we potentially be that place where the directors or others from the different city departments who need to have some input from the community come to this group and work through some things, because we are representatives of the community, right? This is there. I know that we often want additional input, and that's important and valuable, but we also have to acknowledge that we carry some benefit to the city just by merely being on this board. And what might that look like? And so maybe we work towards something in 2023 where we can set a very specific goal around that. And maybe with code, it's our first attempt at that, right? Like and instead of just all our questions being to them, what questions might the code compliance department have of us, right? What would they want to know from us, or how would they engage with us in a way that they feel could be really beneficial? I've got a lot of things stirring in my head that I think will, like Rebecca, some of them actually turn into something, and some of them are just nice thoughts to have.
But that is a role that this board has played actually already. I mean, it's been both a resource to departments, but also an accountability partner, if you're familiar with that term, a place where folks can come and say, well, here's what we're doing. Does this make sense? Or do you think, and get some feedback about, are these meaningful steps, that kind of thing. And, the fire department, human resources division, transit, police department on numerous occasions. And then the community development, specifically around fair housing stuff. They've played that role with those divisions, right? So those are all departments that came, like we're doing with the code compliance, did presentations of material, and then engaged in that kind of dialogue over a meeting or 2 meetings or 3 meetings, or the fair housing stuff was like a year. Yeah, so.
So as chair, I would love to know a little bit more about, is there a way to be more proactive about that? Because it feels like we just wait for things to come to us versus like, is there more we could do to understand a cadence to that engagement, or to understand that we're actually being as, thoughtful as possible? More of a statement than it is a question, I suppose. And,
The nice thing about having that CEI officer in place is that they're going to be working, if they're working internally in the organization, they're going to be helping to, they can help facilitate that relationship, because they can be working both as a liaison, or like, the staff liaison to the board, but then also identifying who are the organizations that are at an inflection point, or, other factors we might want to consider where having that interaction is really timely and useful and meaningful, either because it's something that's important to the community and board members, or because there's work happening in divisions where this could be a really helpful or meaningful step for that division or department.
Thank you. All right. Do we have any public comment?
No, we don't have anyone in the waiting room for public comment today.
All right, thanks, Jess. Any final board comments?
I would just like to lift that tonight is college night and it's being held at the Burma Center from 6 to 8 p.m. So if you're able to make it out or know any middle or high school students that could benefit from joining, I hear there's over 30 colleges, universities, trade school folks that are out there tonight. And that's thanks to VOSIS, Burma Center, and the Urban League, I do believe.
Yes, and there will be folks there that can interpret and translate as well. So there's going to be plenty of language access too. Dina?
I just want to say thank you to you for serving as a commissioner the last few years, and sad to see you go in that role. I know Bunika is not on the call today, but her as well. And we'll see what the future holds for both of you, but yeah, I've enjoyed having you both in that role, and also welcome to the new commissioners and new ideas and new things. And so I just want to lift that up to those going out and those coming in.
Thank you, Dina. It's been an honor for sure.
I'd just like to say, I'd like to thank everybody for a good year, as far as I'm concerned. I was out, then I was back in. So, but I think it's a great opportunity. And I just want to let everybody know that we'll be doing a Kwanzaa celebration this year, hopefully getting more people involved. And we've been doing it for quite a few years now, almost about eight years. And so it's picking up steam. And it's just a cultural holiday celebration for the African-American culture. And so if you hear about it, please join us. We'll be glad to have you participate at some level, or just get the information. And good luck, and we'll see everybody in January.
Thank you, Pastor. I want to echo my appreciation and deep gratitude for everyone on this board. This is important work. You've all been so committed, and I do think the flavor of our conversations will change when we're sharing space. I think it naturally lends itself a little bit better to just natural conversation. So I look forward to seeing you all in person, those of you who can make it in January. And I wish you all wonderful holidays, however and wherever you celebrate. And the 2022 has been as good to you as it has been challenging. And thank you to the city staff for all your support and making sure that this happens smoothly. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Can I ask one more quick
Thank you,
question before you log off?
Oh, yes, sorry. Dina, go ahead.
That's okay. If we have, what is the process if somebody is interested in being part of this board? Is that something like our candidates for the board, are they sought? Like I don't know if recruited is the right word, but somebody sought me out. Is that the process, or can anybody apply to be on this if they are interested in that?
So I'll let Rebecca follow up, but anybody can apply, right? The application is on the website.
Okay.
And on the city's website, and then that application will be forwarded to me as well as other city staff. We actually have an application that just came through this week. You can also recommend folks, but they'll still have to go through the same process. So you them to the application. Is that correct, Rebecca? Yeah. And then the process would be that we would review it. We would look at, who the person is and try and make some sort of connection. And then we would make a recommendation to the city commission, who would have to approve their position on the board.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I do know that we've got at least 2 openings. So we'll be looking at filling those to the best we can. All right, everyone, thank you so much. We'll see you in 2023.
Okay, all right.